Welcome, Walt. Welcome, Mark.
Oh,
Hey,
well, thank
guys.
you.
Everybody out there
Welcome,
in
everyone.
Etherland.
Good to see you all here.
If you have any problems with the audio, hitting F5 to refresh your browser generally fixes things.
Yeah.
Early next week, you'll get an email with a follow-up of this meeting, and in that email, you will have a link to the to the video and to the PowerPoints.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the next Focus Friday is, and that should say September. Although I did get the date right. September 15th, which, guess what, is a Friday. And we're going to talk about HTML table tricks and techniques. And I'm going to talk more about more. And Walt's going to talk more about HTML5 graphics in his part 2. All right, anything before we start?
I don't have anything else. Time to jump in the water.
Let's go.
Okay, I'm stopping my sharing, and Mr. Mark, it's over to you.
All right, everyone. Before we begin, I want to answer a question that I was asked last week, and that was if we could use maintain against hyperstage files. So with the help of Mark Nesson, I installed hyperstage only to find out that the suffix of hyperstage files is not something that maintain can use. So I believe the answer to whether or not maintain can use can change hyperstage files, I believe the answer is no. And when I looked in our documentation, I found that we recommend using SQL commands to do it. So that surprised me a little, but so the answer is no, we cannot use maintain against hyperstage files. Before I begin my presentation today, I want to say two things. The first is there is a lot of code in this presentation, and I'm sorry, I am looking at the wrong, this is last month's. No, I apologize. It should say, I'm sorry, maintain and stack. So I apologize. I will change this before you guys get the presentations. The presentation is correct, just the title is wrong.
See, I'm not the only one.
No, I just summer doldrums.
Yeah.
This presentation has a lot of code in it, a lot of commands. Basically, if you're ever going to be using maintain, this is something to keep as a reference because it shows really how to use stacks. And the other thing I want to say is how psyched I've been, because at the end of each of these presentations, I've been getting 2 or 3 people really interested in using this product and working in their home companies. So keep it up. If you ever have any questions about how to use and build applications with maintain, open cases, and I will be more than happy to help you. Okay, the next thing is, and I apologize for the little levity, I know a lot of you guys from working with you for these last 35 years, but not all of you know who we are. So I just put in a little bio page about what I've been doing since I joined Information Builders in the mid to late 80s. And I just thought this picture looked good. You know, for those of you who are sci-fi geeks, it's Mr. Data from Star Trek. I met him at a con a couple weeks ago. But, you know, I've been at IBI a long time. I worked in the mainframe. I've done support. I've done QA. And for the last couple of years, I've been all around maintain, product manager, QA manager, etc. But that's me in a nutshell, as it were.
Thank you, Mark.
You know, in case you don't know me.
You're just tempting me to do no, this is you in a nutshell.
Look, just because your picture with Mr. Data wasn't as good as mine. All right, guys. So today, and I'm going to go a little quickly because, again, you'll have all this documentation in front of you and you can keep it for forever. But we're going to discuss the stacks use and maintain today. What they are, how to create them, what you can do with them, how to manipulate them, display them, and once you do all that, how to get the data back to the database. Because the stack is the most important item in maintain, we replaced what was called the SPA in Modify, which allowed you to do one thing at a time and have a couple of records and move back and forth in it. But we took that concept and really made it much more usable. So there are two different data structures in maintain: current area variables and stacks. And we're only going to touch on current area variables for a minute. When you create a counter, when you create a flag, when you create a temporary variable, this variable in the current area has one value at a time. It's a single row. A database field can be part of a stack or in the current area. For example, if you say next country in the car file, country will equal England. But if you said next country into stack, stack dot country would equal England. So you can have fields, you can have stacks, you can have variables, but we're going to concentrate on stacks today. So I'd like all of you to think about a stack as a checkerboard, a two-dimensional array. The columns of this stack come from the database. They can also be computed into the database. The rows in the checkerboard, the rows of the stack, can be loaded from a database. So if you have a single segment database, we can load that entire database into a single checkerboard, a single stack, where the columns are the columns from your database and the rows are all the values. If you have a multi-segment, we'll look at that in a minute because we can flatten it out. There is absolutely no limit to the number of stacks you can have in an application, and they can be as big as you want them to be. You can name your stacks anything you want. But whenever I teach, whenever I explain things, I say, please use the letters STK or the word stack as part of your stack. Car stack, movie stack, country stack. So this way, the next person who has to maintain your application, or when you call me for help, I know that that's a stack. Because I can say for all next country into Mark, and that's just not going to mean anything later on. When you create a stack, there are two variables created for you. Stack.focIndex, which is the current row number, the values being displayed, the row being selected, is always going to be stack.focIndex. And even more important, stack.focCount is the total number of rows in a stack. If you load 1,000 rows into a stack, stack.focCount is 1,000. If you load 100 rows, stack.focCount is 100. And this is great when you need to sort or loop through the stack, and we'll go through that in a few minutes. A stack can reference one path in a database, only one. So for something like the car file, you would need multiple stacks because warranty and equipment are in a separate path. The exception is if the seg type is U, or you have a unique segment. Then the unique segment is considered part of the parent, and in the case of the stack on the left, you could have cust ID, address, phone in the same stack, and cust name would just be part of cust ID. In a case where you have card numbers as an additional segment and there's two distinct paths in your master, you would need two separate stacks to load that database into stacks. And again, this is because we have no idea if the fields in the card segment have anything to do with the address or phone segments. But again, you can have as many stacks as you need. So let's say we want to create a stack, but not put any data into it. We have a command called infer. And infer literally says, build me a stack structure, but put no data into it. We like to say you list one field from each segment to load that segment into the stack. Now, yes, all of the fields from that segment are loaded. So if you have 200 fields in one segment, which I'm sure none of you do because that's not great programming, all of those fields would be put into the stack. Since a stack reflects your database, you always must start at the top segment. Now I'll say that again. When we're reading from a stack, we always like to look at the very top segment. And this is also important when we're writing back to the stack because we need to match on the keys. So if I'm going to create a stack, I put infer field list into stack, And maintain will say, okay, I'm creating a stack with this name, with these fields and these segments. I can also add fields into a stack that's created via infer or from the database. And that's simply, I can say, compute stack.data slash field name, slash format, excuse me. This says to me that data is not a database field, but a computed field. You never, ever, ever want to compute a database field into a stack. That's because when you load that stack from the database, it'll get confused. So a stack created from the database can also have computed fields, but you never want to compute a field that already exists from the database into a stack. And you can populate it the same way you would populate any variable. Compute stack sub1.data equals mark. This is a shorthand representation, and we'll talk about this in another place as well. When I say stack.data, it is shorthand for stack sub row1.data. So when there's no parens, it's shorthand for stack sub row.1. So in all of these cases where I'm creating and populating this stack.data is the same as stack sub1.data. So we've already discussed these. Like when I put them on the other slide, I forgot they were here. Stack.focount is the total number of rows, and stack.focindex is the current row. Once you've created a stack, you can clear it. And we always recommend clearing your stacks before we load them. That syntax is stack clear stack name, and you can have as many stack names as you want on that line. When you clear a stack, it removes all the rows from the stacks, but not the columns. So if you already have a stack assigned to the movies file and you clear it, all of the rows are gone, but we still know all of the columns. And when we clear a stack, stack.focount, the number of rows goes to 0, but stack.focindex goes to 1, because you can never have 0 rows in a stack. If you have a 0, you get a stack index less than or equal to 0 error. So that's why focindex is never set to 0. Finally, we can sort the stack with the command stack sort stack1 by field or by highest field, and you can have as many by field or by highest fields as you want. There are 7 ways to get data into the stack, and we're going to touch on all of them quickly. Next, which loads data from the stack. Match, which is the same as the old modify days, match keys and retrieve data. Copy, move data from one stack to another or on itself. Compute, which we just saw. The user entering the data. Call, which allows one maintain to perform another maintain. And exec, which allows maintain to retrieve data from other tables, from other commands like tables, SQL stored procedure, etc. And I love this graphic, and I think credit goes to Ernest Brown for it. But when you have a match or a next statement, the data comes from the database, goes through the current area and into a stack. From there, I can do copies and computes to move it to another stack, or I can display it on a WinForm for the user to react and act on. Going the other way, the data comes from the user or the WinForm, goes back through the current area, and is saved to the database with include, update, delete, and revise. Again, the stack looks like a checkerboard where the columns are the database fields and the rows are the data. Let's look at my favorite movies file, my favorite database. This is movies. Focus file, single segment, one key, the movie code. We know that because it's suffix folk and seg type S1.
Mark,
Yo,
what's the difference between update and revise?
we'll get to that in about 10 more slides. Is that your question or did it come from the audience?
No, it's me.
Okay, I will explain the difference between them when we get there. So the next statement. Very straightforward. And yes, I know we had it in modify also. For all or for n, next field list into stack with or without a where clause. We're going to load one, n, or all records from a database into a stack. We can have a single segment, we can have multiple segment. All you need to have is one field from each segment, and we load that entire segment into the stack. We always start at the top segment and work down. Again, this is important because we must have the keys from each segment, especially when we're trying to write back. We could use very complex where clauses to limit data retrieval, but we can only use and to separate the where expressions. We do not have the ability to use or, we never added that, but there are plenty of techniques to getting around that. And if you don't say the stack name, we can just say next field list or next movie code and load one record into the current area fields. So let's look at this example, and forgive me, this screen is actually an old Dev Studio screen. I'm recycling some material that was really as relevant 20 years ago as it is today. I can load the entire movies file into a single stack by saying for all next movies.moveinfo.moviecode into move stack. In this case, I also could have just said for all next movie code because I was only using one master. Whenever you're using multiple masters that could have similar fields, you should preface those field names with the master name. Since I just started, my index is at 1. Since I know there are 60 records in the movies file, moviestack.folk count is 60. If I was to tell maintain to look at movestack sub5.total, it would look at row 5 at the movie name, the title, and it would be the Smurfs. If I said show me movestack.category, here, if movestack.folkindex equals 1, and that's what I'm saying here, then we'd be looking at row 1, which would be movie code in row 1. If I were to say show me movestack.category, I remember that movestack.category is the same as movestack sub1.category, and that would equal action. So this is how we can reference a row, a column, or a field inside a stack. We can look at the sub name, which is the column, and the field name, which is the value. So what if I have data in stack 1, but I want to move it to stack 2? Well, the easy way to do that is the copy command. And I can copy one, n, or all rows from one stack into another. And there's a really cool technique I'll show you in a couple minutes, which copies the stack to itself. I can also copy one row of a stack from the current area, from a stack to the current area, or from the current area into a stack. And I can preface, and I can use a where clause to limit that. And I'll show you that in a minute. And you have to make sure the destination stack, stack 2, exists. And also, when we use a stack copy, those stacks must be from the same master. So if you have 2 stacks created from the same master, we can copy one to the other. If you have stacks from similar masters, you cannot use a copy. We need to use a loop, and we'll see that in a minute. So in this case, I have a stack called car stack, which I'm loading all of my countries and cars into. So for all next country car into car stack, so they're going to be, what is that, 10 country car combos in car stack. But what I want to do is I want to copy from car stack into a stack called Italy stack, where country equals Italy. So before I can do that, I need to create Italy stack so I can infer country car into Italy stack, because right at the top of this presentation, I said infer creates the stack. If I were to say where car stack.country equals Italy, instead of where country equals Italy, I would get 0 records. Why is that? Because car stack.country is shorthand for car stack sub1.country, and as we all know, car stack sub1.country equals England. So England would never equal Italy. So the 2 things to remember in this example is Italy stack must exist before you copy into it. And when you're using a where clause in a copy, never preface the field with the stack name. And I didn't reference that, but it's right here in the code. So this is a great technique. And this says, what if I have a stack and I wish to remove one row from it? So I can remove the row from the database very easy. Delete country, car, model, body type from car stack. And that will delete the one row that was selected. But if I have a stack that's displaying all the rows, I want to get rid of that from the stack because I don't need to reload it from the database. So I can ask maintain if carstack.focindex equals carstack.focount. If the current row that I'm looking at is the last row in the database, then all I need to do is subtract one from the focount and one from the focindex, and that row disappears from the bottom of my stack and my display. But what if they're not the same? What if the selected row is somewhere in the middle of my stack? Well, this is a really cute little technique. We set a variable to the selected row, and then we do a stack copy, which is a for all copy from carstack.count+1 into carstack.subcount. What this does is it copies the row of data from the row below the row that you're deleting for the entire stack. Let's say the user picked row 5. It moves the data from row 6 into row 5. Then, since we're in a loop, from 7 to 6, from 8 to 7, etc., until we're finally left with 2 values at the end, and we just remove it by subtracting 1 from focount. If you want to try something really cool, it's really neat to see this technique. It's one of my favorites. It's for removing a single row from the bottom of a stack or the middle of a stack. I just mentioned the loop. Well, we do have, that was an inferred loop. This is a real loop. And our loop commands is repeat n, repeat all, while condition, until condition, and then end repeat. Everything between these two statements will be looped. We can loop one, n, or all times. Just be careful if you say repeat all, because if you don't break out of the loop, you will get nasty messages that your system is in an endless loop. So we have 2 internal commands for that. Go to end repeat and go to exit repeat. Go to end repeat goes to the end of the loop, but will repeat again. Go to exit repeat goes to the last line after the end repeat. What if I want to loop through my stack exactly once? How do I know how many rows are in my loop, or in my stack? Well, that's easy. We have stack.focount. So if I say repeat stack.focount, I will repeat exactly once through my entire stack. I can repeat until a condition is true or while a condition is true. And loops can be nested. Guys, again, I'm sorry I'm going a little quickly. I wanted to give you a lot of information. If you have questions, please ask or just look at the documentation. And again, I apologize for going a little faster than usual. So let's say I want to copy data from one stack to another, but they're from different databases, EMP-A and EMP-B. I can load all of the data from EMP-B into stack 2, but if I want to copy it into stack A, I can't say stack copy. So what I do is I set up a compute loop where I can repeat through stack 2, stack.focount, which is the number of rows in that stack, and then compute the data in stack 1 to the values in stack 2. And you'll see the difference here is in EMP-B, I have a user ID field, but in EMP-A, I have an EMP ID field. So the fields aren't the same. I can't use a copy. I do a repeat loop. Then I increment my counter, and I go through again until I've gone through every single field. Touch on match real quick. Match allows you to grab a value from the database that doesn't rely on having to start at the top, match field list from stack into another stack. Let's just show the example. I can compute move stack 2 to MC001 MCA, which is of course JAWS, and I can match movie code from MS stack 2 into MStack. And what this will do is it'll go through my database, locate this value, and load the entire segment into MStack. So again, match works the same way as doing a next with the where. It's just a little cleaner if the field that you're matching on is indexed. Okay, how do I get the data from a user? I have them enter it into a field. I can have them basically a current area field, a stack field, a database field. They can enter one value. There's multi-line edit fields, which allows for an entire text string to be entered. And there's the grid, which allows for multiple fields and multiple rows. All of these allow data to be displayed, updated, and edited. So graphically, here is my grid and here are my fields. I can display one stack, as many fields as I want in this grid, and the user can update, edit, we have techniques for delete, or remove rows from the stack, from the database. Single edit fields can display data, you can update them, and you can delete data from them. Then we have selections. List boxes, combo boxes, radio buttons all allow the user to select or multi-select values. A single list, obviously now we have double list boxes as well, which allow you to multi-select and make multiple selections. And finally, we have the HTML table, which allow you to display multiple fields and multiple rows, and you can select rows, columns, or values using click link functions. So here on the screen, we have a drop box, we have an expanded list box, we have radio buttons. All of them allow the user to make selections as opposed to entering data. Finally, the HTML table, which also allows you to display multiple rows and multiple columns, and it allows you to make selections by having hyperlinks. I'm going to just touch on call real quick. Let's say I have a procedure that I use all the time that returns certain rows to a stack, and I'm going to have multiple applications that use it. I can say in my parent maintain, call C2 into MStack, and C2 can load up the values and pass them back into this procedure. Call allows maintain A to perform maintain B. The current issue with this is in App Studio, there is a small timing delay in using call. So I'm not recommending it as much as I used to. I kind of think it's better to actually put the called code in your parent procedure. So maintain allows one maintain to perform another maintain. But exec is even more important. Exec allows a maintain procedure to perform a non-maintain procedure. So let's say you have a very complex table request that does matches and joins, and with the key fields that the user selects, you return this data set based from a massive table, dialog manager, modify procedure, we don't care. Exec allows you to do that. So in this procedure, which is of course very simple, I'm using table to bring back title, title category by movie code. And yes, I can do this with the next statement, but exec allows maintain to do this. A simple example, not necessary. Very complex examples, necessary. Guys, I'm going over my time and I apologize.
Okay.
So I'm just going to touch real quick on how do you get the data back to the database. We have include, which writes one, n, or all records back to the database. The key fields are, you list only the key fields and we do the match logic for you. Update updates one, n, or all rows of the database from the stack. You only list non-key fields. If you list a key field, you'll get an error. And delete one, n, or all rows. And you always want to delete from the lowest segment. So if you want to delete a model, you would list country car model on your delete line. If you just say delete country, you're going to delete country and all of its children. We have no orphans in maintain. So to answer Walter's question at the beginning, what is revise? Revise was because Noreen very early on in the creation of maintain said, I can say on match update, on no match delete, on no match include. So that's what revise is. On match update, on no match include.
Oh,
You
cool.
list all the non-keys from a segment, and we include the new records and update the non-existing records. Sorry, update existing records, include the non. Now
Yeah.
you say to me, but Mark, what about the car file? Because car file, origin, comp, and car rec are single segment fields, masters that don't have non-key fields.
Correct.
So the answer is you use the segment name. So instead of saying for all revised country car model, we say origin, comp, car rec. So that's how we get data back to the database: update, include, delete, and revise. We have the ability to display the fields using type. You can send them to a DD name using type on DD name. A single caret or a double caret gives you either the field length that's currently in the data or the column width, which makes it much easier to read. And you can use one-to-many stacks. Like if you want to list all the cars for one country, you would use one stack to display the countries and another to display the cars. All right. Real quick, can I have more than one stack? Can I have more than one master file in a stack? The answer is no. Unless they're KU or DKU segments, then yes. Is there a limit to the number of stacks? No, you can have as many as you want. And another question that came up once when I was doing a POC, can my stack contain 8 million rows? The answer is absolutely. But if you put them on a form, it's going to be slow. And guys, I apologize for the data dump. I hope you guys got something out of it. This will be a really good document to have for when you're building applications. And before I turn over my time, are there any questions? All right.
You stunned him, Mark.
Email me, open cases. I'll be happy to help you guys, anything you need. And thank you for listening. And let me stop sharing.
Okay.
The quiet group.
I stunned them
That's
into
all right.
submission.
It's a lot of information there. Oh, here comes the question. Go ahead, Harper.
Is there a question?
Yep. So you were talking about at some point, and I apologize, I should have asked this right when I thought of it, right when you're that point in your presentation. But in terms of matching, is that similar to joining in that the field types have to be the same? So I think you're doing employee ID and like employee name from two different master files or something. Is it just the field types that have to match? Or is it the actual, what am I asking here? So employee ID was a field type of probably like I something or A, I don't know what it was, but, and then the employee name that you were matching to, does that has to be the same field type, right?
If you're doing a compute, then we don't need, when I was showing that, I was saying we can't actually match from the one database to another database, because when you're matching, they actually have to come from the same master file. But in that example, I was doing a compute from a stack field to another stack field, and the answer is no, they don't need to be the same formats. Maintain will actually convert whenever possible. So if you do an integer to an alpha, that integer field in the new stack will become an alpha, and if possible, vice versa. The only time we really have problems with that is with new and date fields and date time fields.
Yeah.
Then we need to use functions to do conversions.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have an alpha and an integer, or an integer and a decimal, no problem at all, as long as they have similar values. Like if your alpha is 100, we will be able to do that conversion cleanly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, any others? Nope. Okay, I'm going to talk about headings, footings, subheads, and subfoots.
Subfeet.
We've talked about headings and what you can do with them. A while back, I talked about just a freeform report, and a freeform report is just basically a heading. So we're going to touch on some of the aspects we've talked about before. Hopefully you remember some. If not, this will be a refresher. All right, so what do headings, footings, subhead, subfoot, what does it all do? So it displays information on the report. You can add text or data. You can control where you place the data or the fields using spot markers. And if you reference a field in your heading, footing, subhead, subfoot, then if you don't have it as a verb object, it will be added internally as a verb object. So just keep that in mind. It won't show up on your report, but it's stored in the internal matrix. All right, differences between a heading and a footing. Placement. One comes before the detail of the report and one comes after. And the data value. If you reference a field in a heading, the value you get will be the first row data value. If you reference a field in the footing, you're going to get the last row data value. Subhead, subfoot, similar. Subheads come before the grouping, and the subfoots come after. And again, your data values will either be the first or last if it's a subhead or a subfoot. So in this example, we're going to do table file car, some dealer cost by country, on table set, page, no page. So that'll give us just a basic report, dealer cost by country. But if I want to add a heading and a footing, I can add heading, enter text between quotes. So these are real quotes, not apostrophes or tick marks as we call them. And you can span multiple lines. You can use as many lines as you want, but just be cognizant of the size of the page. If you're doing a PDF, you might actually then move things to the next page. For a footing, this comes after the output lines. And when we run it, this is what we get. Ooh, ah. So this is just simple text, adding text in your heading and footing. Now we're going to add data. So instead of text, I'm saying country. And to identify a field you want to see in the heading or footing or subhead, subfoot, you're going to have a caret in front of it, a less than sign. That identifies it as either a field or a spot marker. And we're going to talk about spot markers in a bit. So in this case, we're looking at fields. We're going to look at the country value, the dealer cost value, and the retail cost value. And in the footing, we're just going to look at the dealer cost and retail cost. Notice I don't have retail cost after my sum. So here's my output. Notice dealer cost, retail cost in the heading is the value for England because it's the first line in the group or in the report. Footing is going to be the dealer cost for the last line. So I wasn't lying. This is how it works. We're going to talk a little bit about spot markers now. So spot markers are used for positioning text. So in this case, in our footing, I said I want to go in the column 20 and then put D cost. So I'm going to do retail cost, colon, space, but it doesn't really matter because then I'm saying, well, in column 20, I then want you to put R cost. So you have full control where on the line you want to put your information. Okay, be careful because the positioning in the spot markers can be relative. I can say I want it +3. I wanted 3 spaces from where I ended. You can also go minus. So if you go minus, or if you put an absolute value, you have the potential of overriding data that was already there. Okay, we run this, and notice now the footing and the retail cost, the data is now lined up a lot nicer. All right, in this example, I'm using subhead and subfoot. So everything that I've talked about as far as putting text, as far as putting in fields, as far as spot markers, all of that is common across headings, footings, subhead, subfoot. So I changed the example now. I'm going to do subhead, and I'm doing it by country. So I have table file car, print dealer cost, retail cost, by country subhead, and then this is before the, and then I'm going to put the country value group, and then I'm going to show the dealer cost and the retail cost by car, by model. But I also want to do a subfoot. So in order to do a subfoot and a subhead, I don't want to put another by field like I did by country subhead. So I'm going to use the alternative on syntax and say on country subfoot. I could have done by country and did on country subhead and on country subfoot. I could have done that also. So in the subfoot, we have this is after the country, and again, I'm doing dealer cost, retail cost. And there's a reason why I'm using these two fields, and it's to show you the first and the last values that you're getting. So in our output, in the subhead, notice the D cost for the heading and for England is 74.27 and R cost is 88.78. And then in the subfoot, the values are 42.92, 5100. So again, first line in the group, last line in the group. But you might say, well, what if I want to get the total? Well, you can just do subtotal. That would be the easiest thing. But we used to have issues. We used to have certain circumstances where you wanted to do your own subtotals, or you wanted to position them differently. And the result in that would be to do it in a subfoot. So let's see what happens. So I would just say, well, let's just put an ST in front of the field value in the spot marker in the subhead and the subfoot. That should give me the, in this case, an ST is for subtotal. And there's lots of prefix operators you can use, which I'm not going into all of them. But in this case, ST is subtotal. This is, all right, that's just informational. So I'm doing it at the subhead and the subfoot level. I'm putting ST and then the field name. In the output, notice my dealer cost for England is 74.27, which is from the first line. Well, that's not a subtotal. That's just the value. If I look at the England subfoot, though, notice dealer cost is now 37,000. So you can use a subtotal, but only in a subfoot or a footing, because otherwise you're going to get the first value. You can't show an aggregate total until you go through all the data. So it kind of makes sense, right? Let's see. Here are some spot markers examples. You can do absolute, where you do the less than sign and the number. You can do it relative into the headed line. You can do relative previous on the line. If you put a slash and a number, it's going to go that number of lines down. Instead of you having to do, let's say, 5 double quotes with a space in between 5 lines of that, you can just do a /5. The 0x is special because it says, I really don't want to do anything. But what it does do is it breaks up text. So if I have my text, 2 words, my space text, and I want to make one word my blue and the other word text green, I have to differentiate the first text object from the second text object. And then in the style sheet, I can reference those. So in order to separate my text from being one text object, you put in one of these greater than sign 0 or less than sign 0x, and now you have object 1 and object 2. All right. And that was it. That went quick. Any questions? Since I did go so quick, if there's anything that you tried to do as far as headings and footings that you have a question about, let me hear them. Or if there's something you just want to see that I mentioned, but I didn't really explain well enough. Anyone? How do you escape? Oh, sure. How do you escape the less than sign? You don't. Walt, did they ever put in 2 of them equals 1? Walt, are you muted?
Yes, I was muted. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm thinking that they did. And whether it was a double caret or the caret slash, we'll have to check and get back to you.
I'll try it because I got time.
Yeah, you can try that. But with that has been something that's been problematic because we want to be able to stick it in something and actually display it where it was actually the caret, not the spot marker. So, yeah.
I think if you have the caret by itself, you're okay.
Now the other in the wonderful world of CSS, obviously you can use the like the no backspace. There is an escape phrase that you can use that I think we have. It's insert an HTML tag and heading. Yeah. Yep.
There we go. 2 of them.
Yep.
So 2 spot markers back to back will be treated as a literal. Off the top of my head, I seem to think spot markers won't work in Excel. So spot markers, the way we're talking about them, are strictly for the focus code. So whatever it generates should be okay.
They have to be translated. Those effectively have to be translated into Excel.
Yeah, like if you're doing HTML and you have a greater than sign, it might treat that as a tag, an HTML tag.
Yeah.
So depending on your output, there's a little care that would have to be given. How would you sum an average column to give the correct average for the column and just not the actual sum of the average?
Okay.
How would you sum
It's the AVE dot space in the subtotal. You can
How would you sum an average? So is this a computed average or is this a AVE dot?
If it's an AVE dot, if you just specify that and then do an on some fields subtotal.
So it's an AVE dot. So this doesn't really have anything to do with headings.
No, although you could push it. Okay. Yeah.
So we got that, and then we do subtotal.
Right. The problem is you need to
on table subtotal. So then that's the sum of the values.
Right, you don't want that. You want the average again. So try AVE dot space.
But is that the average of the individual values, or is that the average of the values that you see on the screen?
It should be, okay, you only got one subtotal there, right? You
Yeah.
don't have any intermediates, so that should be the average of those.
Right, but it's not the
Normally,
average of each individual value.
it's treating those as individual values and finding the average for that.
Between these 5 entries.
Right, yeah. Now, if you had multiple, if each of those was you had another layer of sorting, if you had 2 buys instead of 1, then you're gonna have multiple lines in there. It's gonna be working on the subtotal, the subtotal of the next highest or next lowest break, summary line, right?
So what I would do is, if you want the true average among all 18 models, I would do a compute and then use the recompute instead of a subtotal.
You could do that.
And then that will give you the average across the 18, not across the averages of the 5.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
No, I was asking around it. She says, thanks, you're welcome. All right, any other questions, hopefully regarding headings? But any questions are great.
Okay.
All right, I will now stop my share.
I'm going to start my share.
And Mr. Blood, take us home.
Let's go to screen 2. And no, okay. Did I get, no, it didn't work. Oh, I know what okay, I want screen 2.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question for everybody. When we didn't mention this yet, so I'll mention it now. At the end of the session, there will be a survey, and you'll get a link pop up that says you're being directed to something outside of the Stream-based WebEx environment, and that's just us taking you to our survey. If you could put on there, I'm curious to know if anybody's running on a mainframe. And if you are you running Focus on the mainframe, or are you running Web Focus on the mainframe? The reason I'm asking is I'm contemplating that we have a lot of customers that are losing people, whether they're retiring or being let go. But there's a lot of knowledge need at the system level. So we started these Focus Fridays as mainframe only, and then it kind of evolved into, well, the code's used everywhere. Yeah, it's a language. But I'm thinking it might be time for us to maybe have a separate session that's mainframe specific, talking about JCL, C-lists, those kind of things.
If
So
there's an interest,
yeah, if you could let us know if you're on a mainframe, if you're using Focus or Web Focus on the mainframe, and if you would be interested in a separate session specific to that. All right, that's my
okay, and just to pile on top of that one, later this fall, we're going to be coming out with some new functionality on the Focus side on the mainframe, which is tentatively called the Focus Studio. It's a new front end for the Focus language. It's basically HTML based. It's driven from a browser. It is primarily to allow you to work with HTML as opposed to the old green screen. If you're interested, if anybody has any interest in that, I'm looking for people who would like to try that out. So if you have an interest, please indicate that in your in the survey. That would be really helpful. Or you can contact me directly. Next month, I'll give you a demo of it so you can get a bit of better idea of what it really looks like. Okay. All right. I guess the other thing was, is anybody interested in Focus Friday t-shirts? If you are, let us know.
How about we ask if anyone's interested in maybe in-person Focus Fridays before we
There's
start
another
working
thing.
on swag?
There's another thing. We haven't been out in the field in a long, long time, and we've been stuck in these little tiny boxes that you see on your screen, and it's getting to be very, we're getting a little crazy.
Confining.
Yeah. So we'd like to, if there's interest, we'd love to get out in the field and come and see you in your neck of the woods. If you're interested in that, please let us know. Things happen when there's interest, so we appreciate that. All right, let's talk about joins. They're pretty simple, except they're not. As our standard, and here's my information. I've been working with Focus now since 1985. I joined IBI in 1987. This was my third career. I was a cruise director for a while. I worked in publishing for quite a while, and then ended up coming into IBI, which was kind of interesting. I came in working on the Wang platform, which you probably don't remember it, but it was the word processor extraordinaire. It was amazing. I worked with all versions of Focus and Web Focus on all the platforms that we've had. My job right now is keeping the Focus language live and well and available to everybody that can use it. Like Mr. Brangle, I'm living down here in South Carolina. He's in North Carolina on the other side of Charlotte with my 3 dogs and my wife. And I love the climate down here. It's so much better than New York. All right. All right. Enough of that. That's who I am. Let's talk about joins. There are lots. When you think of join, you just say, I just got to jam two things together. Well, it's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more complicated than that. It's actually fairly simple. The question is there are actually quite a few varieties of join to actually get specific kinds of functionality available to you. Obviously, if you know about them, you can use them. If you don't, you're going to miss them. So here, let's take a look and see what we can do and see how you might be able to use them. The simple basic join, we're going to join 2 or more related data sources. All right, related. All right. Normal joins are there has to be some relationship because we're going to be working with fields. All right, and the fields have to be the same. We're going to create a virtual structure for reporting purposes because in the world of Focus and Web Focus, we don't require that the databases be the same. Okay, you don't have to be working only with Oracle tables or DB2 tables or Postgres tables. You can mix IMS tables with Focus tables, Focus tables with DB2 or Oracle, right? The language we have supports that, right? We give you the ability to join data regardless of where it's coming from. And the requirements for that are actually pretty simple, and you'll see. There's also the ability to work with what we call cluster joins, all right? It used to be called a multi-table master. It's now called a cluster join. It allows us to put several data sources into a single synonym, all right? Now, why is that important? Well, in the Web Focus world, everything we do is keyed off a master file. All right, so if I can put it into the master file, you can get access to it. All right, and that's a very important point. Now, in the Focus world, that's not required. You're not required to have everything in the master file because you actually have a slightly different approach to it. You're actually working with the language. You don't have to worry about the GUI getting in your way. All right, so the cluster join basically allows you to have multiple tables connected in the master file so you can access it that way. Now, we also allow you to do joins based upon fields that are not real, virtual fields. So I can go from a defined field, a virtual field, I can join that virtual field to a real field in a cross-reference file, which is also very handy because if you don't actually have the field that you need in the data file that you're starting from, on the host side, you can define it and use that. Finally, we also have something called a recursive join. And this is always a fun one. Recursive join basically joins the data to itself. And in joining the data to itself, we can create all kinds of fun sorts of things. It's a very simple way to actually store data, especially with things like bill of materials, where a part could be a subpart for something else. You have the same data actually having multiple potential levels in a dimension. All right. Given that, you could get at those kinds of things using recursive joins, and it's fairly straightforward. Now, finally, we have something called a conditional join, also known as where-based joins, and these don't require any relationship at all. Okay, I can join things with my where-based join, and they don't have to have anything in common. All right, the connection is based on the validity of the conditional criteria. If the conditions I specify are true, then the join is considered to be valid and the data is returned. If it's not, it's not. It's that simple. All right, and it's also that it's amazing what you can do with this. There's no limit to the equality. You're not limited to equality. You can use any kind of expression that you've got available to you. You can add additional screening conditions to this. Now, the joins that we've been looking at, they can both exist as inner or left outer straightforwardly. In some cases, now we support right outer and full outer joins for relational data types, for relational databases. Those are also available. Basic inner join, it's fairly simple. When I have two tables, I'm going to get the intersection of those two tables. Okay. If the result includes the rows that appear in both data sources, it's an inner join, and that's what I return. Now, inner joins are our default. All right. That's if you don't specify anything, you're going to get an inner join. Okay. They can be non-unique, which means that there's going to be a one-to-many relationship between the host and the cross-reference table. There may be multiple records in the cross-reference table that relate to that one row in the host table. All right, and that's kind of normal. That's actually the assumption that's made in most relational databases. Right? There is something else that we have, and that's called the idea of a unique join. All right, where there's a one-to-one relationship between a host table row and a cross-reference table. Right. This is not something that relational tables really know about. They will return all rows. Okay, there are ways to limit the number of rows that come back, but the idea is that all rows are always, when we do a join, all rows are always available to us. With the unique join, an inner join, if it's unique in the focus side, we only get the first one, right? And that can be specified. This is a focus or a web focus concept. As I said, the RDBMSs make no distinction, and they'll always give you all rows. If optimization for the database, for the relational database is on, and the actual join gets handed to the relational database, all matching rows are going to be returned, right? And if optimization is off, the RDBMS will only return the first physically matching cross-reference row for each host row, right? Now, having said that, let's take a look at what else we do. We have this other thing called a left outer join. And we have we have left outer joins primarily because if you think about it, the left outer join is the host. And everything we do when we're working with joins, our starting point is always the left-hand side, the host. When we work with a database, we're always working from the top down. Web focus, our access methods basically work. It's a hierarchical concept, but we work from the top to the bottom, on the left-hand side, from the right to the left, from the left to the right, top down, and we always do access in that way. Now, in a left outer join, we always we return all the rows in the host side, and whether or not they have a data in the right-hand side or not. If there's no data in the right-hand side, it's a short path. Right. This is called a left outer join. A right outer join would be the exact opposite of this. And normally in Focus and Web Focus, if you want to do this, if you don't have a relational database, because a relational database will support that, you can simply, there's a couple of things you can use match, or you can flip it around and turn it into a left outer join by inverting, basically changing the structure of the join. Now, that may or may not be a good thing, depends. Now, left outer joins processing depends upon a number of things. There are a couple of commands. Set all basically allows us to control short paths. We also have a set short path command, which we'll talk, and the optimization setting. And these basically, the optimization is critical for the relational databases. Set all and set short path apply to everything. All right. Now, if you specify left outer, you're going to always get a left outer, regardless of the setting. All right. However, if you don't, these commands are going to be more important. Now, for this type of a join, this can be unique or non-unique. Doesn't make any difference. Now, left outer joins are going to be automatically kicked in if you specifically ask for it. Join left outer, or if you've got in your cluster join, the CR join type is left outer. Right. Under those circumstances, you're going to get a left outer join, regardless of what the settings are. Right. Just to show you, just a review in terms of the unique joins. And I think Mark mentioned this earlier. When we have the concept of unique in the Focus and the Web Focus world, basically allows us to treat a segment. And if I have a unique segment, since there's only one of them, and that's the concept of unique, I can actually treat it as part of my parent. And we do that in terms of table. When we're doing requests, we can actually treat that as part of the parent. It does create some, with unique joins, it does create some issues. Now, unique joins, and if you don't specify multiple, you're going to get a unique join. And I've noticed often that we default to a unique join, which I'm not quite sure that I've never really understood that one. If there's more than one record there, I'd really rather know about it. If not, if I use a unique join, I'm only going to see the first record. And if indeed I have multiple records over there and I don't, my first one I hit is a short path, I might not see it at all. And yet there might actually be one. So unique joins, only if you know that there's only one possible value. Decode tables, that sort of thing. That's perfect for that. Assuming optimization is on, if I have all turned off, I'm going to end up with a join, an inner join. I'm not going to see my short paths. This is optimization on. If I have all on, I'm going to end up with a left outer, and this is assuming my left outer is not specified. In Web Focus, and I'm not working with an RDBMS. If I have a left outer, I'm only going to see the first row. Right. All right. Non-unique joins, one-to-many, are handled the same regardless of whether the RDBMS or Web Focus handles the join. Doesn't make any difference. One-to-many is non-unique join. Multiple, it's the same. You don't have to worry about differences there between RDBMS and Web Focus. We handle them the same way. What does the syntax look like? Well, for everybody that's using the GUI tools, you need to understand the differences so you understand what's actually in play. Our normal join basically starts off with a join command and then indicates the type of join that you want. Left outer, right outer, and inner. Okay. Once I've specified that, I have to tell it what I'm actually going to join. This is the host side. I can have multiple fields. I can join multiple fields in my host, and I can give it a tag. I have to use the word in to specify the fact that these fields are in a specific host file. I'm going to give it a tag in case I need to reference those. And if I have duplicate field names on both sides of my join, I'm going to need something to specify which one I want. All right, and I can do that with the tag. 2, you'll notice I have my join in to unique or multiple, my cross-reference field or fields in my cross-reference file, and I can tag that differently if I need to as a join name, and that's the end. So when I'm working with my normal join, I'm joining field in file to field in file, right? I'm joining fields, right? And hold on to that thought, because a little bit later we're going to see something where that changes. All right, I'm referencing here. I've got two different data sources. I want to connect them together because I want to report out of them. I can join emp ID and job to all emp ID in EDGIC file. Now, all and multiple mean the same thing. So effectively what I've got is a multiple join here, right? This is going to give us a single logical structure that I can use for reporting, and that's the whole idea. All right. Now, these data files do not have to be related. They don't have to be the same. They don't have to be all RDBS. They don't have to be focused. They don't. If they are, great. There's some benefit to that. But if they're not, don't worry about it. They can also be flat files. All right. All right. You can mix and match the data types, the file types, and that's actually the power behind the language. When I join it, I end up with this kind of a structure. I end up with a straight line view of something. And that's what I'm looking for. As I said before, our way of looking at data is top to bottom, left to right. We look at things in the world of a hierarchy. When we first came out, when Focus was first put together, the dominant database was IMS. That was what was put together for the space shots in the early 60s, and that's what Focus cut its teeth on. And that's a hierarchical data structure. So the idea was, okay, I have to be able to navigate hierarchies. How do I do that? Well, if I have multiple segments, and that's what each of those blue boxes represents, I have to be able to travel. I have to be able to traverse the path and know that the data that I'm working with is all related, and that's what the join is doing. The join is relating the job data source to the education file, and it's doing it in such a way that the data actually does have a connection. All right. Now it's doing it without actually doing any physical work. All right. It's a logical structure. We can create as many of these as we need. We can delete them as necessary. They are limited to to read-only operations. You can't do a modify or maintain. I guess I actually probably could use join if you're executing something within a maintain. If you have an exec that basically is doing a table request on a join structure, you can use it there. But normally it's in modify, it's not allowed. It's going to optimize within a relational table. It's going to hopefully optimize in such a way that it'll basically give you the reference segments in a subtree starting with the root segment. Now, on the non-relational side, we're going to create a single path through the data. All right, that's from top to bottom, left to right. All right. Now, define-based joins. We can create a virtual field if I don't have the field I need, because we're joining a field in the host to a field in the cross-reference file. What happens if I don't have exactly the field I need? Or I've got a composite field in my cross-reference file, but I have the pieces in my host file. You can literally put them together with a define and use that to create an equijoin to the other file. So that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Important thing to remember: join clears defines. So in the case of using a define-based join, you have to issue the join first, unless you're working with it in a master, in which case it never gets cleared. And then you have to issue the define after you issue the join, right? All right. The define field that's in the join can only use fields that are in the host file and constants, because we haven't done the join yet. So it's pretty straightforward. The non-join defines non-join define fields can use fields from both sides. of the in that kind of a request. And you can have multiple base joins, multiple define base joins if you want. It's entirely up to you. The define can be created in the master file or in a define file name. It's up to you. In the web focus world, typically they're put into the master file so that you have access to them. The define must be created after the join if you're using define file, but before the table file. That's because join clears defines. Except if you use the set keep defines equals on or all, which will allow you to preserve defines through a join. We created this setting quite a while ago when focus was used to build enormous applications. And it wouldn't be uncommon to find, thousands and thousands of lines of focus code out there going through modifies, table requests, all sorts of functionality in the same application, literally as a process. So keep defines. I might actually set up a whole lot of defines that I want to use later. I might need to turn. If you issue a join in between. If I don't use keep defines, I'm going to have to reset those joins, but I can carry them through by using the keep defines. That's why that was added. It's not the default. Define-based joins look a little different. You recognize with this join left outer, righter, and inner, and notice there's a little bit difference here in the host. We're joining the define field with a host field. So that whenever we specify a define-based join, we have to specify a host field for the host file. In other words, I have to know where to evaluate this define, and that's how I do it. With the unique and multiple, I'm joining it to a cross-reference file field in my cross-reference file. I can have an as join name and. So the structure is it's similar. It's that word with that triggers the define and tells me that this field doesn't exist currently. It's going to exist either in the master file or in a define that's going to follow the join, so the join knows about it. The with identifies effectively the evaluation point. Okay, where's the join actually going to take place? If I've got a multi-segment file that I'm joining from, okay, where am I going to evaluate this? All right, how far down that file do I need to go? The join will be done at that particular point, and based on the define field. With a right outer, you need to have the set short path SQL turned on. That's required. All right, we'll talk a little bit more about what short path is in a little bit. But just so that you know, heads up, right hour, whenever we're using it, assumes a relational database. Simple case where I'm going to, and this is in sales and edu file, I'm going to join an ID number with city because I'm going to create the ID number on the fly. Here I'm using a defined file to actually decode city to turn it into an EMP ID number, and I'm then reporting based upon that. And my results, voila, I get exactly what I want. The idea here is you have the ability to create things where they weren't available to you right off the bat. So if you needed to create something to do the define with, to do the join with, you have that capability. It's part of the language, part of the tools. Recursive joins. Any kind of a hierarchical DB mouse can be joined to, basically you can create a hierarchical DB mouse, you can join it to itself. So if I have a part, subpart, or a manager employee, or a chart of accounts, these are natural base hierarchies, all right? And they are recursive. Well, we can describe that very easily, and we can do this right now with Focus, XFocus, and IMS because those are hierarchical. It's useful for storing these kinds of things. Here's my generic data source, okay? And it's a simple hierarchy. I've got two different segments. I've got names and addresses. Now, in doing this, as soon as I do a join, I can join from field B in generic tag G1 to field A in generic tag G2. I'm connecting them from the bottom. I'm connecting to the bottom, and that's the important thing. Join names and tags are required here, so I can literally create a view of that recursive database. All right, the database only exists as field names of the two segments, name and address. That's it. But when we look at it, we see it as a somewhat larger hierarchy, and it allows us to actually report off of it that way. The tags, you're going to have to name your tags or names are required in order to be able to reference which level we want to get to. If we see tags, we use them. If not, we'll use the first 4 characters of the join name. If we see both, we'll use the tags. Okay. If you don't have a qualifier, you're going to get the record at the highest level. All right. So if you want something below the highest level, you have to use the tags to get there. Right. You can extend the recursive structure with additional joins from the bottom segment up to 16 levels. So you can get pretty complicated. You can build something that can take a very complicated file. It looks simple, but it's a very complicated structure, and actually read it and decipher it very nicely. Whenever you're working with focus files, the join to field has to be indexed. Okay, just as a reminder, that's a requirement on any of the joins. Now, let's dive into cluster joins a little bit.
Well,
go ahead.
So I just want to say that if there's any doubt of how focus sees the field, they can always do the $FF against the join structure.
That's correct. You can also do a check file, picked, and it'll show you a picture of what it thinks it's, once you've got the joins in place, it'll show you a picture of the structure that it thinks it's working with. All right. And that's also, sometimes that's very important. Remember, when we do data access, when we do our retrieval, we're doing top to bottom in that structure, top to bottom in a single line. All right. And we will go to the left and then go to the right. So we will take the leftmost path when we do our access. So if you take a look at the picture, if you have concerns about what you're actually getting, take a look at the picture and make sure that you've got that we're lined up the way that we want to be. That is, if your data should be in the leftmost path, top to bottom. Okay. All right. What's working with clusters? The idea behind a cluster effectively or a multi-table master is very simple. I've got the join put in the master file, so I don't have to worry about it. It's there. You don't have to worry about it. All right. Each segment, each file is added to the cluster by reference using a CR file pointing to the base synonym. In other words, we have multiple synonyms, and we're going to create a cluster synonym in effect to basically bring these together. The child segments are linked to the parents using the join where attributes. Something like this. You can see that I've got two segments here. The city bike partial OLEDB segment is basically a child of the station zip OLEDB. There is a join type there. It's indicated as an inner. The join where is a station ID is equal to a specific value. Start station ID. Right. Fairly straightforward to set up. Right. You can report easily against this, and you're going to be working with the highest level sort field. Okay. There's no limit to the shared dimensions used in this request. And effectively, this is what we're doing. We're sharing dimensions. We're building, in effect, a star schema. If you take a look at it, we're going to build a star structure. And depending upon whether or not they're unique segments or non-unique segments, they may always be available, and we may have a single line that we have to travel through. Multiple non-shared dimensions can be used if they have the same parent. And reporting ultimately has to be against the fact table, the top, right? We're working officially, okay, what we want to be able to do is to work with the top and then traverse down. We can sum, if we're working only with the fact tables, in other words, the fact tables, not the dimensions, we can sum from each. Using a maximum only having a single field as a sort. All right, so there are limitations when you work with clusters. There are things that you can do and things that you can't do. They're actually designed initially structurally to handle stars and schemas like that. Okay, dimensional tables. Now this actually lets us, just like a regular join, it lets us get to more than one data source without having to actually code an explicit join, which is nice. It reflects a single logical structure, while the physical structures are separate. It allows a one-to-many or a one-to-one relationship, as well as both inner and left-outer type joins. The one-to-one relationship, remember, one-to-one is a unique structure, and we will treat the unique structures as if they are part of the parent. We still do that we want a single line of access. So when you're working with joins, if you have unique segments, they're going to be treated as part of the parent segment. So you can have multiple unique segments hanging off the same parent, and all of those unique segments, while they're pointing to separate files, are going to be available in any join. All of them will be available because they are unique, because we treat them as part of the parent. You can also do conditional joining on a non-multi-fact. No degradation in the runtime over a dynamic join by creating these. These support both read-only and read-write operations, especially with a SQL. These optimize to a select statement, right? The same way. And then in a focus world, a non-relational world, where we're relying on the focus language rather than SQL to do the work, we're working with hierarchical structures, which is what what focus is designed to do. You need to use the language to optimize the request. If the join is the one thing about the multi-fact cluster joins, we've been talking about cluster joins where there's been a single fact table at the top and we've been hanging dimensions off of that. You can actually have multiple fact tables in a cluster, all right? And you can have multiple facts by adding them. Join will actually support that. You can have multiple root statements. We support that as well. Now that kind of goes against the grain of everything we think about. We typically work from a root. How do we have multiple roots? Well, we do. We support multiple roots. It's something that we had to add in because the relational world and the world of dimensional forced us to. A star schema, basically, fact table is normally seen as the root. The dimension tables normally hang off as the child segments, something like this. And in many cases, you can actually have more than one fact table sharing dimensions, all right? And this is a fairly common thing, things like time, all right? Time dimensions, anything that is common to multiple fact tables could very easily be a shared dimension. Now, we can add another fact table to a join or to a cluster by using syntax that we have in the language, and this is actually how it came in. Join as root. And when we issue the join as root, the syntax is join as root, and again, we're going to go with a list of fields in an application file to a unique target file, and those are the in the target file as a join name, and we issue it with an N. There are some limitations. It's unique. You're going to do this to a unique. This is not going to be multiple, right? That's just the way. This is the way that we create it. Now, here's a simple example. I'm going to take I'm going to actually add in another. I'm going to add another root into the WF Lite. I'm going to bring in something from outside, and then WF is our WebFocus retail database. I'm going to bring in another database using the join as root and then report off of it. And this can be done very easily. You're creating this particular cluster on the fly, all right? And once you've done that, you now have access to both, to the data in both fact tables, which you normally wouldn't, because your fact table usually is at the root. Now, with two roots, this allows us to get to it. Now the join can actually have, as we said, the join can have additional parents. You can add a new fact table using the join as root. The source must contain at least the fact and at least one child dimension. I can't add a dimension to a non-dimensional table. I got to have at least one dimension there already. So adding another fact, got to add it to if I use the join as root, I've got to have a dimensional table already set up. Now, that's the join twos. Now, what about joining from a multi-fact cluster synonym? If I'm using that multi-fact table as a host, there are some things that we can't do. We can't do conditional joins based on that. And in a little bit, I'll talk to you a little bit about what conditional joins are. The join has to be unique. All right. We don't allow you to do multiples. The target cannot be another multi-parent synonym. All right. So you can't go from multi-fact to multi-fact. That's not allowed. The target of the join has to be a single segment. Now, these are limitations, but again, what are we ultimately trying to do in this case? We're probably looking at some sort of a lookup table or a decode. All the fields in the join must be in the from to, must be all the fields mentioned in both the host and the cross-reference segment here must be in a single segment. Okay, you can't mix and match segments under those circumstances. Here's a cluster that we built out of some of the retail stuff, shipments, sales, product, and we've got we've set up a multi-segment, a multi-fact, multi-root down here. We can actually add this in here using doing a join here. I'm going to join from my vendor ID here, and I'm going to add. I'm doing this join, and I can actually that join is actually pretty easy, and I can get the data from that structure using that, and I have access to all the data in there. All right, real quick, set all and on. These all and on basically control, all basically tells us whether we're going to have a left outer join or not. It started as all, it controlled everything initially, and then when left outer came in, join left outer basically took over, and that's what is predominant now. If it's off, you get an inner join. If it's on, you get a left outer join. If it's pass, it has nothing to do with inner or outer, right? Pass has to do with whether or not we allow you to see the data that's actually allow you to screen on the data that's in the cross-reference segment. The inner and outer must be explicitly set in the join command. Otherwise, the setting for all will take precedence. So if you get used to using inner and outer, you don't have to worry about all. Okay, that's taken care of, and that's generally a good idea. Now, there is a difference in short path. Short path is, how do I deal with the data when I have a short path? What's there? What's actually in my short path? The default has always been nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing you can do. It's empty. So you really can't do anything with it. All right. There's really no way to see that. All right. There's no corresponding cross-reference segment, and you can't really screen that. Now, in the world of SQL, it's different. We can, since there is no short path, there's always something there. Because of the nature of the joins tend to be Cartesian products, there's always something there. So we have the SQL version, which is not the default, but you can ask for it, actually supplies missing values for those short paths and allows us to continue and do the screening against a record that would considerably be a short path. So we can, among other things, we can see the short paths directly, which is one of the reasons why we can use this. So remember, especially this works in both focus and with relational tables and non-relational tables. This functionality is available so that you can actually set it up so that, yes, indeed, you can see your short paths directly. All right, conditional joins. The last thing I want to zip through. Conditional joins are notable because you are not limited to equality. All right. in terms of your conditions. You can use any kind of a condition you can specify in a where clause. Fields in the files are not joined as they are in equijoins. Files are joined. Segments are joined together when we're connecting segments rather than fields. There's no index required here. The conditions determine whether the join is successful or not. If the where criteria basically allows the joining of fields with no visible or common field. All right, and I'll show you a quick example real quickly. The syntax is different because of in the third line. You'll see that I've got left outer, right outer, inner, and file. All right, the file is the thing that we're joining a file at a field name. Now, the field name after at can be any field name in the segment, any at all. Now, notice I've got the with, which means I can do a define based join here. All right, and that's exactly what that is. To unique or multiple, file cross-reference, again, it's joining file to file, not field to field. All right, and that is the thing to remember because we are joining segments together. We're using the field simply to mark them. I can join between video track and movies. The idea here is I want a transaction date and video track that is more than 10 years after the release date in the movies, and the movie codes and video track and movies have to match. And this is the way you would do it. You basically set those two conditions up in a where clause and include it with the conditional join.
Well, can I just
Go ahead.
interject? I see a lot of people are dropping off, so if you got to go, we understand. You can always finish this on the recording.
Yep.
But please fill out the evaluation once you do go. And thanks everyone for coming. And
Okay, I'm almost done. Let me wrap this up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, it's a simple request against the video track, which ultimately cannot come up with exactly what we're looking for. Primary point, you don't have to have any connection at all. Here's a simple case where we're going to join car, which has nothing to do with employee, and actually come up with a meaningful data. We're trying to figure out whether somebody can afford a specific kind of a car. All right, and we're going to take the base of the car information and their salary information and create an expression that will determine whether or not they can afford a specific kind of a car, what kind of car they could afford, and voila. And you can do that all in the join. And that's all I've got.